Good morning, everyone, or sorry, afternoon. Welcome to the Taco Tuesday edition, the May 2023 Higher Education Tableau User Group Meeting. So today we have just a couple of announcements and we'll open the floor for you to make any of your own. We're going to start with Meet a Community Member with Katie Stephenson from Rice University, followed by Student Success and Tableau Public with Michael Faulkner from Surry Community College. We're going to have some Tableau conference highlights, and then Lisa Trescott will bring us home with Let Us Talk About Some Tips. And we'll finally have a wrap up and chat as we typically do. So one quick announcement from me. Today is the last day to get your proposal submissions in for Analytics Day, which is on June 15th. You have until June 5th to register if you haven't done it already. And I think Roshi is going to put that link in the chat. Does anybody else have announcements they'd like to make? You can come off mute. You can share announcements. You can share job postings. If there's anything going on, you can put that in the Slack channel or in the chat as well. Any takers? All right. Well, in that case, we will get right down to business. I'd like to introduce Katie Stephenson from Rice University. Since February of 22, Katie has been working in the institutional research as an institutional research analyst in the Office of Institutional Effectiveness. She's involved with both internal and external requests and is also involved in working with student survey data analysis. So she uses Tableau for the majority of her work processes. Before joining OIE at Rice, Katie worked at Southeastern Louisiana University as a research associate in their Office of Institutional Research. Katie has a BA in psychology and an MA in psychological research from Texas State University. And her go-to fun fact is that she played Quidditch, now known as quad ball, in college. So Katie, welcome. Thank you for being our Meet a Community member this month.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So just go ahead and start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role and your team.
So like the bio said, I'm at Rice University as a research analyst. I'm in a team of 4 IR members, and then our office sits within the Office of Institutional Effectiveness. So we report to the provost, but we also work heavily with all sorts of offices on campus on various data requests. So I like to say we're definitely pretty involved with the campus. I enjoy getting to interact with a lot of other offices for sure. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about what type of data you work with?
So I work a lot with student data primarily, so like our census files, but I also do work a good bit on the faculty and staff data. So we're some of our public reports using both of those. And then I'm probably you would say the primary survey analyst on not on campus, but in our office. So I've been doing a lot of visualizations for different student surveys, primarily our in-house surveys, but I've also done some with like the NCHA survey that I believe was done we did last in February 21. So
yeah, that survey data, that's a beast to work with sometimes. So how do you use Tableau at work?
So for everything, pretty much. There are very few things as far as like my tasks go. Like pretty much all of my data requests I'm working on, I'm doing in Tableau. The majority of our data is in the Tableau server, so I'm consuming data from there. And then when needed, like survey data is from Qualtrics. So I am using Prep to then manipulate it, put it together how I need it to then put it in desktop. And then I also use a little bit of Publix. That's how we publish our, front-facing dashboards. But there's really, other than email, there's really not a lot I don't do in Tableau as far as my day-to-day work processes.
Completely understand that. So do you have a favorite project that you've worked on in Tableau?
So a bit of a cluster of projects more so. So last summer I was So getting my feet wet with everything and trying to put shape to a lot of the survey data. So I worked with, again, like I mentioned, like NCHA, which National Colleges. Oh goodness, I'm blanking on the acronym. I should have written it down. But large survey. So there's a lot of interest with our well-being office, as well as like there was a task force. So I did a couple different dashboards that I was able to kind of really expand my knowledge of Tableau, and I learned how to do like the Likert, diverging Likert graphs and whatnot. So, or charts. So I really got to kind of expand my skill set in Tableau doing that. And I thought it turned out really fun. I don't know how much it was used at the end of the day, but that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, as long as you learn something, that's always a plus. So how long have you been using Tableau and how did you learn it?
So there's 2 dates, I guess. So I've really been using it for, a year since I started at Rice. That's when I really implemented it in my regular use. Before that, I started using it, I don't know exactly, but like end of 2020, beginning of 2021, when I was at Southeastern, and the system was like, hey, we have Tableau now, and you now all have Tableau. And it was like, well, I guess I'll learn how to use this. We were, because that shop, we were just a SPSS shop, but I was like, I'll see what I could do with this. And actually, Jenny, you were one of my mentors actually early on, you and Jen Schilling. So thanks for helping me troubleshoot when I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to try something. So I'm thankful that the system did do that, because then that really, I think, was instrumental in me then being able to transition to my current role.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I remember when you reached out about learning that. I'm glad it went so well.
It was interesting.
So what is your favorite Tableau feature?
So I love prep just in general. I know it's not really a feature, but I just love prep, because especially with the survey data, I'm visual, I color code it. It's very, a little OCD maybe, but it's just, I love it so much. And then within like Tableau desktop, I really enjoy using parameters and doing like parameter swapping. Again, a lot of times with like, not just with survey stuff, but that's actually the summer project I mentioned. That's where I figured out this parameter swapping, because it was like, well, they want to see it by gender, and now they want to see it by URM or this or this. And I'm like, I don't want a different one for each of these. Can I have it within one? And so then I found this knowledge base, like KB for Tableau, and they were like, here, you can do it this way. I was like, oh, thank God. So ever since then, before then I was scared of parameters and was like, I'm going to avoid them as much as possible. And then once I figured that out, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got it.
You can't live without it now.
No, I love it. Yeah.
So is there any thing in Tableau you want to learn more about?
So the other thing I'm afraid of, I guess you could say, is sets. I've not had a use that I know. I guess I don't know enough about them, I guess, to know if I've had a use for them. But so far in my experiences, I've been able to do what I need to without them. But I feel like that's an area that it's a native, Tableau thing that I should take advantage of, I guess. So I need to find a reason to learn them, I guess.
I definitely recommend learning about them. I didn't know how powerful they were until I saw a sets session at the Tableau conference years ago, but they're great.
I know, it's one of those like back burner, like I'll do it eventually. So maybe this summer, maybe that's what the summer plan will be.
Great idea. So what is one thing you wish you could go back in time and tell Tableau newbie you?
Don't use wide data. Take your data. I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter it just, you flip it. Don't let it, make it long, make it narrow, whatever you want to call it. Tableau will be much happier, and you will be much happier.
That is excellent advice.
Yeah, that dashboard, I had you help. I believe I had some feedback, like it was wide data, and that was, I think, at the end of the day, it would have made it so much simpler if it had just not been wide data. So
yes. So do you use Tableau outside of work, and if so, how?
No, I want to, like, I have a Tableau public page, but there's nothing on it. So that's one thing I want to do. I know like there are different ways to kind of start engaging with that, but I think especially with this role, since it is so Tableau heavy, I'm a little bit like, okay, that's Tableau is work. Unfortunately, I guess a little, not unfortunately, but Tableau is work. So in my off time, I guess I'm not really like, oh, what else can I do in Tableau?
I can understand that. So is there anything else that you want to share before we jump into the lightning round?
No, I think that about covers it.
Awesome. All right. So first up, I think today is prime number day. So what is your favorite prime number?
3. It's also my favorite number, so that was an easy one.
Well, that is easy.
It was my jersey number growing up, so I was like 3 is it.
It's also National Taco Day. So do you have a favorite taco filling?
Oh, absolutely. There's a taco place nearby. But carnitas is like my go-to, but I also really like lengua, which is tongue.
Mm.
It's very good. Don't knock it till you try it, okay?
I've never had the chance to try it, but maybe one day. So today is actually also National Drinking with Chickens Day, which is, if you know anything about me, I have chickens, and I have the book Drinking with Chickens that this is based on. So are you pro or con backyard chickens?
I'm pro backyard chickens. I've never had them, but I've known people that do. But the real my real goal is to have goats one day. So that's the real, I've made it then.
Too.
You know,
Then they're done that.
I want goats. They're so cute.
So are chickens.
Chickens are cute too, but goats, I'm not saying that they're not. I just, for some reason, I'm fascinated by goats. I don't know why.
All right, so today is World Turtle Day, but since I didn't know how much you know about types of turtles, I thought we'd ask instead, who is your favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle character?
I'll do Donatello. I'm not super familiar with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but he's the inventor one, and his thing is purple, and I like purple. But actually, the turtles. No, actually, turtles wouldn't be a good question. I have a good friend who studies tortoises, not turtles.
Oh, that's
they would kill me for almost, conflating those. But
so in honor of National Sing Out Day, what is your go-to karaoke jam?
So I don't sing in public by any means. But in car rides, I jam to the Hamilton soundtrack. So
awesome. All right, so today is also World Redhead Day, and you might have a little bit of that redhead vibe going. What's your favorite thing about being a redhead? Why are redheads the best?
And also, FYI, I didn't realize it was Redhead Day, guys. So then I was like, "Am I redhead to Jenny?" In the messages. So that's where that came from. So I think that they're cool because I've always wanted to be like a real redhead, like really like that weird, like vague, am I red or not? But I think it's interesting how they perceive potentially pain differently, and like there's supposedly like studies that have like I'm not going to quote studies because I don't know the names of the studies, but apparently they say that there's like anesthesia, like redhead dose. Like it sometimes takes a little more anesthesia for them to go get knocked out for surgeries and stuff. So
I had not heard that. That is interesting. I don't know if you have looked at my Tableau public page at all, but I know redheads are typically a very small portion of the population. However, they're overrepresented on the cover of romance novels.
I believe that. I would believe that.
All right, so next up, I think you may have seen Roshni mentioned in our music selections today that it's National Talk Like Yoda Day. So if you have a favorite Star Wars quote, and if you don't, you can also take something from Star Trek, Spaceballs, whatever.
I'm a massive Star Wars fan, so this is right up my alley. In fact, I have too many, so I'm gonna go with Rebellions Are Built on Hope because I really like the Star Wars story. It was so good. But then I also enjoy the Obi-Wan Hello There. Just I like how because they have it in the original trilogy, and then they have Ewan McGregor's version do it, so it's kind of a little cute callback. So
Nice. And last but not least, you are from Texas, or you are living in Texas now?
But I'm from Texas. Yeah.
All right, you are from there. So what is your favorite city and your least favorite city in Texas?
So for nostalgic purposes, San Marcos, because that's where Texas State is my favorite. And then I grew up in Waco, so that's actually probably my least favorite.
Hold up. I'm going to interrupt here because Waco is also the home of Dr. Pepper, which is the best thing to come out
I
of
love
Texas.
Dr. Pepper. No, that's like inline, like vein all the time. But I can't with the silos and all that. I just can't. And
I'm also going to add, this is probably, they should be paying me for this. I heard that Bluebell has a Dr. Pepper float ice cream flavor. Have you tried it yet?
I haven't tried it yet, but definitely like my friend Discord, everybody has been posting about like, oh my God, we have to try this. So that's definitely on our radar.
Okay. All right. There are good things that come out of Waco. Just throwing that out there.
No, there are. And like, I wasn't born there, but like I grew up there. So like, obviously it's good, but it's I have feelings about things. So, it is what it is.
I get it. Thank you for letting me interrupt.
Nope, you're good. I appreciate it. Because I get Dr. Pepper, favorite beverage ever. I can't buy it and have it in the house because I will drink it. So that's we're at lunch and I'll have it at lunch or something. So.
Well, thanks for letting me in on that because I hadn't heard about that before. And I love Dr. Pepper. All right. So
it's the quintessential, if you grew up in Waco or anywhere near it, you're going there as a school field trip. At least once.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for being our META community member this month. And if anybody else would like to be featured in the future, please just fill out our interest form and let us know.
Thanks again for having me, guys.
Anytime. All right, so next up we have Michael Faulkner from Surry Community College. He's going to talk about student success in Tableau Public. Michael has over 4 decades of experience in education and business. As Executive Director of Institutional Research at Surry Community College, he has applied statistical analysis and data visualization using colleague and increased student success at Surry Community. A graduate of the University of Michigan in 1962 and an MBA from Xavier University has allowed Michael to serve in a dual capacity as both faculty and staff. This educational experience, combined with 5+ years at the Oracle Corporation, provides for a unique perspective on data integrity, data structures, and the application of statistical methods. He's joined us today to talk about Tableau Public as a tool for collaboration and investigation, the Surry Community College 30-second design rule, and to share 3 student success dashboards. So welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Jenny.
And I am going to share my screen.
Just one clarification. We don't put the in front of University of Michigan. We just say,
okay.
Unlike other schools, we're pretty low key at Michigan. So
can you see my screen with your slide deck?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right. So you just tell me when to go.
We can jump past the biography. I think you did a great job with that one as well. So we can go right. Yeah, perfect. Keep going. First of all, thank you. Jenny's kind enough to drive for me this afternoon. I'm not sure why, but I've been having some technical issues with Zoom on my Mac. I'm sure it's me, and of course not the Apple Corporation. But the main thrust of today's conversation is what we've initiated here is the 30-second rule on our dashboard, which after last month's session, I thought, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk about the other end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum says this, that, if a dashboard can be quickly understood and achieves the maximum amount of understanding or awareness with the least amount of effort, that would be, from my definition, a very efficient and effective dashboard. So it's kind of a philosophical question, really. What's really important in our dashboards, and specifically with this user group, because Candidly, this is probably, if not the most important HETUG, it is certainly one of the most important ones. It's the ones where data comes into the educational environment. So, I would throw it out as a question to the group to really talk about what's important in our dashboard and what really moves the student success needle. Because far too often, I think, especially being a former high school math teacher and then a math teacher in higher education, we kind of lean to the notion that complexity is somehow a measure of effectiveness. And that, on the other hand, simplicity is perceived as being both choppy and inadequate. So we're really back at that main question, what makes a good dashboard? I think if you go to the next slide, we can kind of get into some examples. This one, for example, is one of the most effective slides that the North Carolina Community College system puts out. And the North Carolina Community College system is the third or fourth largest community college system in the country. So our ability to understand our cohorts and our performance measures is really at the core of what we do in the institutional research arena. This particular dashboard, while the actual visualizations themselves are not complicated, is allowing the user to be aware of how a cohort ages across the entire system and compare their performance to the entire system as well. So on the right, you'll see my institution, my college, Surry Community College, small, actually more of a mid-sized community college in the scheme of the 58 community colleges, located in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. We are one of two main regional community colleges in the area, certainly servicing most, if not all, of this part of rural Appalachia. So understanding the performance and, more to the point, the non-performance of our student populations is really kind of key and critical to how we're ranked, how our performance measures are published, and equally important, how the accreditation organizations, in our case, it's SAC-COC, view our performance. So in this case, what you're looking at is the 2019 cohort. That would have been a group of freshmen that came in for the first time back actually in the summer of 2019. And in that particular first semester, 22% of them actually took the requisite English courses, college level English courses, and ultimately succeeded in that. Another 9%, I think I'm showing my age here, excuse me, 8% took the college level English classes, but were not successful. And now you'll see the bigger issue, almost 70% of our student population opted out of taking an college level English class in their first year. Now, these are students who were seeking a credential, an associate's degree. They're in an associate's pathway program. And for that large a volume of student to not take English in their first semester, or college level math and English in their first semester, is really quite problematic. In my college's case, it was even more dramatic when you compare it to the community colleges system as a whole. And you'll see on the left, what was more typical was 59%, 6 out of 10, were not taking a math class or an English class in their first semester. So that's kind of an issue, and one that we wanted to focus in on. But we had a difficult time, kind of formulating our understanding and getting our heads wrapped around these cohorts. So we took it upon ourselves in the institutional research group to try to simplify it, staying consistent with our 30-second rule. And Jenny, I think if you go to the next one, you can kind of get a feel for it. So I opted to go with this visualization. I'm sure we're all familiar with this, the bubble graphs. And you can see what I did was compressed all of the 4 years, or the, I think, 13 semesters, into one annual or one semester by semester view. Unfortunately, I was going to actually use the actual application and show you how it plays out, but it would free up too much information about the students. Basically, it's this. This particular cohort has 800 students in it. The blue bubbles They represent students that have not taken, in this case, a college level math class in their first year, not taken it. And I think as you kind of get a feel for it, as you progress more into the center and cross-reference the color scheme in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that just by looking at this graph, you can pretty quickly perceive what the problem is in that first year at Surry Community College. Not enough of our students are taking mathematics. Now, surprisingly, of those students that do take our math classes, we have a remarkably high success rate. In fact, I just stepped out of a meeting where we were discussing this specific cohort as having achieved its highest level of success on our campus in the past 10 years. So that's the quality of performance you can get based upon a quick understanding of the data. And if the user chooses to at this point, they can begin to drill in and they can use the filters, or they can look deeper into it and begin to understand the nature of the cohort, whether it's Pell or non-Pell, full-time or it's part-time. But for those of us who've been in institutional research for a while now, these get to be pretty complicated issues pretty quickly. Faculty are very, very busy folks, having been one myself. There are very, very few professions out there that get evaluated at each and every semester, every 16 weeks, basically. And expecting faculty, I think, or frankly, any user, to spend an inordinate amount of time going back and digging into their data to really understand or ferret out the trend, I think that's a bridge too far. So we did a 180, and we chose the 30-second rule. Basically, that was my design. Quite frankly, I think 30 seconds might be still too liberal. Might have to pare it down to a 25-second rule. But the objective was so that faculty could pull up a dashboard or pull up a visualization, look at it, get an understanding of what's going on, and then move on through the rest of their day. Let's go to the next slide, Jenny. So it is a philosophical discussion. What makes a good dashboard? And I think each of us, all of us, especially in this user group, have to really come to terms with that. It's going to vary. First of all, I don't think there's one golden rule. The 30-second rule works pretty well here at Surry Community College. As time has progressed now, we've been working with dashboards for the better part of 4 or 5 years. We might change the nature of the 30-second rule. Not everything has to be consumed within 30 seconds, but there are certain key components or key performance indicators that I think all of us would agree that we need as many of our faculty and our staff, our stakeholders, the community as a whole, to be able to look at, grasp, and understand and move forward. So I would argue, next slide there, Jenny, that the greatest impact, and it is the easiest to understand by the greatest number of users, is the definition that I would rely on for a good dashboard. But that's up for discussion. And in fact, I welcome a lot of the feedback because when you're at one small rural community college, you tend to get isolated. But I firmly believe that if we can design our dashboards to maximize the impact in the shortest amount of time, whether that be 30 seconds, 45 seconds, or 15 minutes even, that's a good dashboard. Let's take a look at another example. Okay, so we started out with, had transitioned from institutional effectiveness to institutional research, a long debate that I'm sure would bore most of us. But when we started out back in 2016, we were down here. What you're looking at is a peer comparison over time of each of the various community colleges in the North Carolina community college system. So out of the 58 community colleges, we were effectively 10th from the bottom. 1 year later, after presenting our data to the faculty, we moved up. We moved up to the rank. So we started out number 10 from the bottom. Now we're in the bottom third, but we're slowly inching up there. We're getting up to an average mark, average being that yellow line. And then one more year, we moved up here. This is this year's data. We came very, very close to achieving an excellent rating. Now, understand that this is a dashboard that's put together by the North Carolina Community College System. It's not my dashboard. and it represents a peer-to-peer ranking across the entire community college system. So it's a true representation of where we compete, not only against peers, but very, very large institutions. Wake Tech is one of the largest community colleges in the nation, and their numbers are here as well. And we project that all things being equal, that we can, as we continue to understand our data and work with our data, that next year, Jenny, we would be up here. And we're able to do that because of the information that we gained from the complex dashboard presented by the North Carolina Community College System, repackaged, if you will, to comply with a 30-second design rule, so that once again, we can get the maximum amount of participation and buy-in from our faculty community. So in a little over 4 or 5 years, we will have effectively transitioned from 10th from the bottom to undoubtedly one of the top 10 community colleges in the system. And the data, understanding our data, has helped us to do that. Next slide. In addition to the performance that we've seen with our North Carolina Community College system, internally, if you could, let's go to the next slide. It'll show you some of our results. We've achieved some of these elements. Now, let's take a second and just kind of read through them. And these are as of this year. And again, still staying focused on the 2019 cohort. We effectively cut our student non-success rate, which in a fall semester was about 1,000 students, a little over 1,000 students, a pretty big number of students. And especially when you consider that we're in a relatively small rural community. So when you take roughly 25% of the student population of the local community college, and they are not successful, and you'll notice I'm keying on the word non-success. It's not to suggest they were failing, rather they were just not successful. So many of our students, even well before COVID, were dealing, like many of, I'm sure all of your students, who are dealing with personal issues, family issues, a whole host of issues that frankly, candidly dating myself again, my generation would never have even really considered. Everything from drugs to not 100% sure where they're going to be getting their dinner tomorrow night. All of that is built into non-success. So I want to kind of clarify that we're not talking about the failed student. We're talking about non-success. It also does include students who did attempt a certain math class or a certain English class, and they did not pass it. So yes, there is the true academic failure component, but a much larger portion of those students that are not successful were our early withdrawals. And that's where we really had to focus in on. Well, by effectively presenting the data in a quick, orderly fashion for the benefit of the entire campus community, we were able to cut that rate in half. Concurrent with that process, our academic support tutoring activity, both online and seated or within the academic support area, doubled the first year and is now approaching a tripling of the original year. One of our big areas that we have always been challenged with, and I suspect many of the colleges on this in this user group face the same thing, is the internet non-success rate. We were able to come down almost a third on our non-success rate. Now, it wasn't simply by putting up the data that the internet non-success rate dropped. It was a little bit more engaging than that. As a result of studying our non-success rate, presenting the data across the campus community, we were getting feedback from faculty and from staff for us to consider the possibility of certification for our internet instructors. As a result of that presentation of the data, excuse me, and our understanding of the data, we were effectively able to initiate a program of certification. Subsequent to that certification process, ongoing with all new incoming instructors, we now find our internet success rate improving and our number of non-success obviously declining. And this is a topic too that some people may not be totally familiar with in the conversation, having to do with full-time equivalency. In North Carolina, the community colleges are basically budgeted based upon their number of full-time equivalency units. It's no secret, the North Carolina Community College system has shown it, but basically every year for the past 12 years, there's been a steady decline in the number of FTE. It's a complicated calculation based upon the number of contact hours, the number of students, how frequently they meet. But at the end of the day, it's a budgeting unit that determines the number and the amount of dollars that you're budgeted. Over the past 2 years now, we've actually slowed that decline. Now, that's not a huge that's definitely not an increase, but we have slowed the decline. And that undoubtedly has to do with the level of student success that we've been able to achieve. You know, the formula is really pretty simple. You know, student success equals retention. And if retention is the new enrollment, then enrollment equals greater FTE. Beyond the numbers, though, beyond the numbers, beyond the graph, beyond the data visualization, every semester on this campus right now, we just had graduation last week, hundreds of students are more successful every year. And we're able to achieve that because faculty now understand what the big problems are affecting or limiting the student success on our campus. And the way they get that is through a quick understanding or a relatively quick understanding of the data. Next slide, Jenny. So here's what happened. In 2020, we were down at the bottom. 2021, we moved up. This year, we just missed achieving an excellence rating with our English. And as I said at the beginning, we're anticipating by 2025 to be one of the top 5 English divisions in the country, or excuse me, not that aggressive, in the state of North Carolina. Next one. Here's another approach that we've taken. Recognizing the problems that we had in the internet, I initiated a real simple dashboard. You don't have the benefit of the color scheme here, but the columns on the orange columns are the total number of non-success, and the red ones are non-success associated with internet. And up at the top, you can see that F for failing, W for withdraw. A grade that we have locally is withdraw failing. And during the COVID years, we initiated withdrawing because of an emergency condition. Well, in the fall of 2022, just last fall, we were able to achieve these results. This represented almost a 66% improvement across these 10 courses in terms of our non-success. But we still have to work on it, right? I think all of us would recognize the trend here. Out of these 10 courses, just a handful of sections, you can see that the big problem still remains that non-success rate is associated directly with students taking the internet courses. It's an area that we know we have to continue to work on, but it's very clear and it's very vivid here. Next slide, Jenny. So overall, what does it look like? Well, again, these are all dashboards that we make available to the community college. They're open, they're published, they're out in the open, which is kind of a lead into Tableau Public that actually shows on a yearly basis. If you look along the horizontal axis, you'll see time. And then along the vertical axis, you'll see counts. So every week we present the entire faculty, the entire community, with an update on our non-success rate. Now in fall, you'll notice it was at the end of the fall semester, we had 1,000, as I had mentioned before, 1,056 students were not successful with a corresponding enrollment of 3,222. Just 2 years later, through this simple tracking effort, I'm pleased to say that now we've almost cut that in half so that we're at 595 against a total number of non-successful grades of 1,132. Yes, the enrollment did drop, and that's the point of showing it, but it did not drop at the same rate that our non-success rate did. So in effect, our students were more successful over time, over these 2 semesters. And for a small community like mine, the ability to have that kind of an impact is incredible. Next slide. So where do we go next? Well, this is the challenge. Talking about the 30-second rule. It definitely does not mean easy. In fact, on the contrary, I would say it's more complicated. It's more complicated because you have to understand the nature of your organization. You have to understand the nature of your students. You have to understand your stakeholders, and you have to be able to look at the data, evaluate the data, package the data, put it together in a dashboard, and allow the users to be able to get to it, understand it, and quickly move on. And I suggest that the 30-second rule is a good criteria to work with. So what's some things that we can be thinking about as we move forward? Next slide. Well, we've targeted our message now and started to rely more on Tableau Public. And so as an objective, and I know, having watched it over the years, and I'm sure many of my colleagues on this presentation would agree that when the dashboards first came out, there was this big rush to put the information out there, respecting at all times the privacy of the students, but, showing the actual performance. So it was not uncommon that you could go out and look at other colleges, and you would see a lot of the similar type of data going on in the public arena, on the public facing. Well, I've noticed those same colleges over time now have pulled much of that information back inside their firewalls. So that's a piece of the puzzle that we have to give some thought to. Because if we can put more information out there, always respecting the privacy of the students, it enables students, parents, and trustees to make better informed decisions, just as Tableau has been indicating across industries. And it allows state and federal entities to be able to look and see and understand your performance. And a big one down there is the accreditation councils. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But Tableau Public has allowed Surry Community College to take this data and take these results and share it with many of our colleagues across the state in a much easier fashion than having to contend with firewall restrictions, so that we can ask them, hey, does this make sense to you? What does your academic support activity look like? Are we really affecting change here? Or is this just a dynamic that's occurring within our student population? And in the future, our next slide. Of course, I don't think any of us could have a conversation about Tableau right now and not talk about Chat GPT. This is fascinating. This will take the 30-second rule to a whole new dimension. It's not only going to facilitate information being presented to each of our communities, but it's going to actually make it more dynamic and more in depth than I think we've ever seen before. Next slide. So I'd like to open it up at this point to the group, and I'd love to hear your questions, your comments, your ideas. Go pound sand, any of the above.
Thank you so much, Michael. I am kind of scrolling through the chat to see if there were any questions from the audience. I didn't have it up during your presentation, so.
There's one near the end from AJ Peterson, if you want to grab that.
All right, AJ says, I'm super curious what methods are being used to place students into their English and math courses when they initially enroll. AJ?
Oh, that is an excellent. I know everybody says that when they get a question, but that is really an excellent question. The reason that's an excellent question is, as a result of studying the North Carolina Community College system, complicated dashboards or more involved dashboards, I'll put it to you that way. We were able to perceive that a lot of our students were, I won't say by default, but without a lot of discussion or a lot of evaluation, being placed in what we would call the college first year experience, the traditional college first year experience. We were putting them in, math, English, science, maybe a humanities course, with the expectation, as was common with many advising organizations, that we would give them a sampling of what it means to be a college student. Nothing wrong with that logic, other than many times students were being placed into those programs without really understanding the full significance of the program. That's why when we saw the what is basically the outcomes dashboard from North Carolina Community College System, that we were kind of taken aback, because a good 10% of our students, over and above the system average, weren't taking math and English in that first year. And these would have been the students that we would have anticipated would have. So as a result of that effort, we have now gone back, and the bubble diagrams, we've gone back and revised our QEP for SACS accreditation to look at our advising practices. And again, that's precisely why you want the data to be readily understood and readily available across the organization, so that you can get that type of feedback. Just like you came to that conclusion by looking at those graphs, we too came to those conclusions. But the interesting thing, and I'll throw credit to my friends and colleagues at the North Carolina Community College System, we would have never understood our cohorts had it not been for their dashboards. And now today, we're in a position where we can actually start to manage those cohorts, and we're seeing progress and we're seeing improvement every year. Thank you. That was a really good question.
The next question is, how much data cleanup do you have to do prior to creating your dashboards?
A lot. A lot. And I was kind of chuckling to myself when Katie had mentioned the fact of not using live data. I intentionally, first of all, let me step back. If it's data that's going out to Tableau public, entirely different constraints, no reference to the students. The lowest level of data I go to is the course level, consistent with my friends at North Carolina Community College System. We refer to them as the system office. Nothing below that level, meaning no student level data, just strictly college course data. What I do is I spend a lot of time in giving thought to what the data should be presenting, meaning what am I trying to bring to light? You know, if I'm trying to bring to light the fact that internet non-success is dramatically affecting us, then I've got to distill my data down to as small of a data set as possible. In that particular dashboard I showed, we had only 3 or 4 columns worth of data across 10 sections. Again, the emphasis here is not on how big the data is. It's 180 degrees opposite. You want to think in terms of how small and compressed and concise can I make my data. So a lot of effort goes into scrubbing the data, but even more effort, I would say, goes into designing the data, designing your data extract to meet the needs of what the dashboard's attempting to put out, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. The next question is, how did you get weekly data on grades?
What we did is we have a process at our college where student grades are being posted, every week, meaning if a student withdraws, and again, the key here is that you're looking at non-success, right? So the main grade that I was interested in was the early withdrawing grade, the W. And those are being updated, weekly. Some weeks, for example, we'll see, 4 or 5 withdrawals. In other weeks, we'll see 20, 25 withdrawals. So when you're looking at the big blue column on the left, what you're actually looking at is the early withdrawals.
All right. And I think the last question of the day is, what placement test do you use for math and English?
In the North Carolina Community College System, one of the reasons I really enjoy the North Carolina Community System is we take all comers. So we do have some basic assessment of a student's math skill coming in, but we also look at the holistic picture, looking at the student's grade point. So not all students are assessed.
And we did have one more question come up. How do you manage the expectations by senior management and what they want to see? For example, if they want up to the minute information.
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I'll be honest with you, I'm very fortunate. I answered directly to the president of Surry Community College, Dr. David Shockley, and this was actually his initiative. It was his desire to turn this institution into a data analytical institution. And as a result of his making that announcement in the spring of 2018, we have we basically went from an institutional effectiveness organization to an institutional research organization. And with that change, kind of giving away a little trade secret here, my son, actually, an electrical engineer out of Virginia Tech, was the one that introduced me to Tableau a couple of years ago. And I said, you know, what we need to do is we need to start putting some of this data up in Tableau Public. So meeting the expectations has always been easy for me. He and I sit and we discuss and we come up with a message that we think is necessary or beneficial, and we go down that path. So senior staff, the president of the college, basically endorses everything that we do. And then at the same time as well, we also rely on a series of planning committees who help kind of direct us and focus our attentions as to where they would like to see some of the data going as well.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much. If there are any other questions, please feel free to follow up with Michael in the chat. We really appreciate you taking the time to present for us today.
No, it's my pleasure. Wish you all the very best, and it was nice talking with you all.
I do believe that next up, Andrew is going to talk to us about the Taco 23 or the Tableau conference highlights.
Thanks very much, Ginny. My apologies. I was clicking the wrong button.
That's all right.
Yeah, so Tableau conference happened May 9th to 11th, and I imagine that many people on the line today were in attendance either in person or virtually. So we wanted to open up the floor and see what you found interesting. And if everybody's too shy, I'll chime in with some of my own ideas a little bit later on, but feel free to unmute yourself or toss it in the chat and I can read it aloud for you. But curious what jumped out to you from Tableau conference. Roshni's put a couple of links in the chat to the session catalog of those that were recorded and more information on Salesforce Plus. Okay, it looks like Alexandra posted about write-back extensions for Tableau, the ability to manipulate data in the interface of Tableau and have that written back to your database or other kind of source data. Lots of people, I assume, from Alvaro. Yeah, Tableau conference. I first attended at the Hyatt at Olive 8 in Seattle, and there were 600 people. I think that was the second Tableau conference, and my most recent one had like 20,000 people before the pandemic. The scale is immense. I see synchronized scrolling, and Ken Flerledge put out a blog post on this actually over the weekend as well. So if you're curious about that topic, it's worth taking a look at.
And that session was also recorded on Salesforce Plus, so you can see Ken and Kevin, duke it out with their dueling Tableau tips.
Nice. Lack of women's shirts and probably diverse shirts in general, I imagine, came up. Crystal posted about show sheet sorter. I don't think I'm actually familiar with that one. That looks interesting.
So if you go to the, there's sort of a PowerPoint-like element in Tableau. So if you're probably used to seeing the tabs along the bottom. If you go all the way to the right, there's an option that looks like a bunch of different pictures together, and that lets you kind of see all of the dashboards and other tabs that you have, and you can reorder them just same way that you can in PowerPoint. It's been there for, that feature's been there for a while, but it's one that most people probably don't even think about or like expect to see. But I think Kevin showed that at the end of that presentation. But yeah, like Crystal just put a mind blown emoji in, and I feel like a lot of people reacted that same way when they realized that it existed. So.
Touche. Yes, I never knew that was the name of it. So I've learned something as well. This is awesome. Okay, so a couple of highlights that I saw. Shared dimensions in the data modeling experience looks to be really powerful when it comes out. So this gives you the ability to bring together dimension tables like dates as an example, that can be related to multiple different places, multiple different fact tables, that kind of thing can be really helpful in a star schema type setup to simplify an otherwise complex data model. My gut instinct on this is that when it's released, it's going to be really helpful for tasks related to planned assessments versus actual assessments. That the data for those lives at very different levels of aggregation and in different places. So Tableau calls this the meatball to go with the noodles that were representative of the Tableau relationships. They're also introducing a couple of new chart types, it sounds like. Radial charts and Stanky charts. So our apologies to Ken, but I think having these built-in tools is going to be awesome, but you can still learn an awful lot about the concepts from Ken's blog and his presentation last month. The recording is posted if you haven't seen it already. Other than that, there was a whole lot of talk about AI. No surprise there, I'm sure, to this group. In Tableau's case, probably the big innovations that are coming are Tableau Pulse, which is like a curated feed of metrics and other important information, and Tableau GPT, which will help you find data and I believe summarize data. Last but not least, for the coding folks in the audience, VizQL coming as a data service looks really interesting. So for those who don't know, VizQL is the underlying data engine that Tableau uses to access data in a variety of locations. It's what makes the magic of drag and drop actually work as an interface to the database. But for a long time, it's been bundled directly within the product. Now, or in the future, when they fully release this, you'll be able to make use of VizQL if you're embedding apps in different places. So you don't necessarily have to use Tableau as the front end of it. You could be using other tools as well, but be able to leverage this powerful capability around VizQL. So it looks really interesting if you're in the embedded analytics space in particular. Anybody else want to chime in on their Tableau conference experience?
The embedding playground looked interesting too. I was too busy typing to listen, which is really bad. I'm sorry. But it was basically a way for you to create embed code so you can put a filtered dashboard directly into a view without having to code it all yourself. You basically set the filters just like you would as you're interacting with the dashboard, but in a slightly different interface. And then it spits out the code that you can then copy and paste and put directly into whatever website it is that you want to show that visualization. It definitely kind of takes a little, lowers the barrier to entry there for folks who do want to try embedding into portals instead of having to always point people to their Tableau server or cloud site.
Awesome. That's great. And last but not least, we posted a link in the chat to an 18-minute overview video. If you didn't get a chance to watch the keynotes live, this Tableau team gives a good perspective on what was available there. And there's a number of other blog posts in the community as well that cover both the pros and the criticisms of what was unleashed. So worth checking out. And with that, I think we can move to next.
So I'm really excited about this. So we know that TC's over, but there's a whole lot more to talk about. And if you think back to November of 2021, that was another TC. We saw someone in higher ed win the Iron Viz contest. And that someone, she assembled something like a 7-layer Tableau dashboard. There was a line chart, a map, a scatter plot, parallel coordinates, the pages shelf, a Spotify link, and probably a bunch of other dashboard fillings that I have missed in this little overview. But that person, that was Lisa Trescott, who's a research analyst at MiraCosta College. And today, Lisa's here because she's some tips to share with us, and she's also bringing a whole lot of cheese to today's presentation, which I really can't wait for us to dip into. So, Lisa, Are you ready to shred it?
Yes, I am. Let me share
Excellent.
my screen. So yes, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I am a research analyst, like Varshney said, at MiraCosta College, and I did win Iron Viz, but more recently, I won the Tableau tip battle at the conference that we just had. So if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's a bracket style competition where two people go head to head and they have 1 minute to show their best Tableau tip. And then the judges vote on who's going to advance in the competition. And so I prepared a whole lot of tips when I was preparing for battle, and only two of them made it to the stage. So today I'm going to be spilling the beans on all of those tips that I had curated and was thinking about using in the battle. I'm using the Tableau Superstore dataset, but you will probably notice that I have aliased a lot of things to be more on theme. So you're going to see more of a taco store or taco restaurant type data set than the Superstore. And just a warning, as Roshni said, I will be shelling out a lot of taco and Mexican food related puns. So if you're not super into puns, I'm sorry, this is nacho kind of presentation. Okay, let us get started with making a clustered bar chart. So here I have sales for my different menu items across 4 different years. And the way Tableau defaults to building a bar chart, it doesn't put any space here in between the years, which is kind of hard on your end user, right? Especially when you have a lot of categories and a lot of years, you're going to get a lot of things that it's hard to separate and parse out visually. So I'm going to show you a technique that I learned from Yvette Kovacs. I learned it on Twitter. And ever since then, it's become my go-to for creating clustered charts with vertical bars. So if I go up here to columns, I'm going to take menu category off, and then you'll see I just end up with these 4 bars for my 4 years. And in place of menu category, I'm just going to double click into columns, and I'm going to type index. And what index does essentially is it just counts the number of things that are in your view and then indexes them. It puts them on an axis from 1 to however many categories you have. So if you see along the bottom, I have an axis and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 for my 4 years. But in this case, I don't want to index the years. I want to index the menu category. So I'm going to right click on index and change compute using to menu category. So I get those 3 bars back. And then I just need to play around with the size. So if you go over to size, you'll see you have 2 radio buttons. One is for manual. And if I keep it on manual, I can only get the bars so big. Even when I max it out, you can see they barely got larger at all. So if I click fixed, what that does is it fixes the size of the bar to be 1 unit. So you can see that each bar is going 1 unit on that axis. But for me, I like a little bit of space between these. So I'm just going to change it to 0.9. That's going to give just the tiniest bit of breathing room for the bars. And then the reason this trick works to cluster those bars is because index gives you that continuous axis, and a continuous axis, as you all probably know, is editable. So if you double click on that, you can get even more spacing if you want by just changing the range. So it's fixed it from 0 to 5. If I change it from -1 to 6, I would get even more spacing in between those years of data. So lastly, you're just going to want to uncheck show header. And now you have your nice little clustered bar chart. And like I said, I like to use this technique for vertical bars. I just like the way it adds the uniform spacing on the sides of each year. But if you have a horizontal bar chart, you can do it differently, and it's actually a little simpler. So let us do it a second way. So here, instead of using index, I'm going to go up to analysis, and I'm going to go down to totals, and I'm going to add all subtotals. That's going to give you a bar that has all the subtotals for each of your categories. So I don't want this though, I want to hide it. So I'm just going to click on it, just a regular normal click. I'm not doing anything special. And you're going to get this little pop-up here with a caret. So next to automatic, just hit that and go down and select hide. And now that's gone, but you still have this header. So all you have to do to get rid of the header for total is right click, format it. And then if you go into label, you just take that off. And now unbeknownst to your user, you've got that total there, but it's hidden. So you've got some extra padding in between all of your groups. Okay, my next tip is about making fantastico headers for any kind of chart you want. So here we have sales for the different regions, and we have 2 separate headers. One is for restaurant manager and one is for region. But stylistically, I'd like to just put those into one column and then format them just to be a little more visually appealing. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go up to columns and I'm going to type min of 1. So what that does is it just puts a mark at 1 for each one of my categories. And I don't know why, but for some reason, my brain works better when this is a circle. I think that's how my brain got what min of 1 was doing. It's literally just putting 1 mark at 1 for the different categories in your view. That's what we're doing here. And I want this to become a header. So I'm just going to drag it to the left side of my sales chart. And then I want to push this circle to the side, right? I want it to look kind of left justified. So I'm going to double click on the axis. And again, I'm just going to mess with that range. So instead of fixing it to start at 0, I'm going to fix it to start at 1. And that's going to push my circle all the way to the left-hand side. And I'm just going to take the axis title off. So now we have a mark in Tableau that you can just edit like anything else. So I can bring region onto label and I can bring restaurant manager onto label. And then I can go in there and edit it just like I would any other mark, right? I'm going to left justify. We will make manager bold and a little bigger, and we'll make region like a gray color. So now you've got something that's a lot more formatted and just looks a little bit nicer than having those two headers on there. So we're going to uncheck show header on our region and our restaurant manager. And then we just need to get rid of this guac circle over here. So I'm going to go into size and turn it all the way down to 0. And I'm going to turn color opacity all the way down to 0. And then you can see the circle has disappeared. And then you just want to get rid of this axis here. You might be tempted to right click and uncheck show header. But if you do that, you're going to lose your axis for your bar chart too. So I would, if you want to keep that, there are 2 ways you can get rid of this axis. One, you can just format your text to be the same color as your background. So in this case, white, and then it's gone. Or Agata Keterick showed me after the tick battle that there's another way to do it. You can double click in here and just turn your tick marks off. And that will also get rid of that axis on just this one. And so now you've got a bar chart with some headers that are nacho average headers. I messed up my own pun. Okay, next tip is going to utilize the same concept to put multiple bands onto one sheet. So a band is a big aggregate number. You can replace the A with any adjective you want. But you know these numbers, these are the enormous numbers at the top of a dashboard or usually on the side that just show kind of like your big KPI metrics. And so I'm going to put multiple onto one sheet using that same min of 1 trick. So if we go up to columns, I'm just going to type min of 1. And again, you see I'm getting this circle right here just to show you that I'm getting a mark at 1. And here I don't have anything else in my view. So it's just one single mark. Now I want to put 3 bands in this case. So I'm going to hold control and I'm going to drag min of 1 2 more times. So now I have 3 separate marks that I can edit and turn into bands. And I'm just going to turn them into all of them into text. But you'll see over here, I have 3 different marks cards, all labeled min of 1. And so these are going to correspond to the different bands we're going to make. So I'm going to put sales onto one of the texts, and you can see it popped up here on this first one. We'll throw profit onto the second one, and we'll just put orders onto the third. And now you have 3 marks that you can go in and edit independently. So if I go into orders, we can add a header, and we'll make this bold and big. And we'll do the same for our profit. We'll give a total bold, and we can change the color here. And then we'll do the same for sales. Last one, we'll make it a different color too, just to demonstrate the point. So now you have your 3 bands, and the beauty of using min of 1 is they are all independent. So you can do things like change the color. You can go in and change your tooltips. So in this case, I've created some other sheets that maybe you want to use as a viz and tooltip. So you can give them separate ones. So right, maybe I have one that works for sales, but I want a different one that works for profit. So you could do that here as well. And same thing for orders. So you could do that for all of them. And the reason I'm showing you this is because a lot of you might be thinking, well, I could just do the exact same thing with measure names and measure values, which you could. You could use measure names and measure values to create basically this exact same view, but you don't have that same flexibility or versatility that you get when you have the min of 1, because again, these are all separate marks, so you can edit them all independently, and you just have a lot more options of what you can do. So the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to clean this up a little bit. We're going to format it and turn off our row dividers and column dividers. And we'll take the 0 lines off and we'll hide the axis. And now you just have these clean bands that you can use on your dashboard. Okay, my next tip is pretty spectacular. We're going to talk about how to resize these bar charts directly on your dashboard. So right now I've got 2 bar charts. The one on the top is pretty thick and the one on bottom is a little bit thinner. And as a type A personality, that drives me crazy. I want them to be more similar in size. So if I wanted to change them, usually what I would do is I would go to the sheet, I would go to size, I would resize it. I'd go back to the dashboard and say, oh, darn, I made that one too small. So then we go back, let's make it a little bigger. Oh, now I made it too big. So I wish there was a way I could do this on the dashboard. There is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click on my marks card and type 1. That's it, just 1. And then I'm going to throw that onto size and nothing has happened, which is what you want. Then I'm going to go back to the dashboard and I'm going to show the size legend just for this top bar chart. And if you double click on your size legend, you can edit it right there on the dashboard. So you can see your bars will get bigger when you change it here, smaller, whatever you want to do. And we'll just try to get it close as possible just right now for the presentation. Click OK once you have the size that you want, and then just remove that legend. And now you've resized your chart directly on your dashboard. So you didn't have to flip back and forth. Okay, my next tip is using separate color legend. So there are a lot of cases where you may want to use a separate color legend for your different measure values. And so that's what we're going to do here on this table. Before I do that, just a little bonus tip. I'm going to make these cells a little bit bigger using my keyboard. I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to hit my right arrow twice and my up arrow twice. And that just makes the cells a little bit bigger so you all can see them. And then I'm going to bring measure values onto color and we'll change the mark to square so we get a heat map. And what you can see is we have one color legend. It is going from the smallest value in orders, which is 1,800, to the largest value in sales, which is 836,000. And that is not helpful, right? We basically just created 2 color blocked columns, right? So what I'd like to have happen is have a color legend for orders that just takes into account the values for orders and one for sales. So the way to do that is very easy. You just right click on measure values and there's this little option that says use separate legends. So when you do that, you automatically get the 2 separated legends. You can see you got 2 separate cards over here, one for orders and one for sales. And if you want to go in and change the colors, you can do that as well. Just double click on the legend itself and you can change the color. Let's make this one orange, and sales, maybe you want to make gray. And there you have your 2 separate color legends. I would advise you not to do more than 3 color legends on one table because then it gets a little bit overwhelming. I also want to show you something else that I didn't know was here for the longest time. Whenever you have a color legend, you can click this button and do include totals. When you do that, it automatically goes down and it takes the total into account as well. So you could do that for sales as also if you wanted to include your total. And then I don't know that I would want to do this with the grand total, but I might want to do it with something like the average. So you can change this aggregation here, but just by clicking, and then you get that same little menu, that caret that I showed you before for the bar chart padding, and you could change that to average. And then that kind of makes a little bit more sense in terms of why you'd want to use that on your color palette. So you could do it with both. And then you just want to make sure for your end user, you change the grand total. So you would format that. Instead of saying grand total, you'd want to just say average, so your user knows what they're looking at. And now you have a table that includes the total, has 2 separate color legends, and the total is an average. Okay, last tip is pretty flantastic. This one is showcasing sales for our different menu items. And you can see I have state on filters, and I've got it set so that all of them are selected. And when I use state in my tooltip, I hover over and oh no, I've got this pesky little asterisk where it says state, and your end user doesn't know what that means. All it means is that multiple states are included, but your end user just sees an asterisk, right? It works when you have one state selected, right? The state shows up here as California. It shows as Arkansas when I select Arkansas, but when I select all, I get that asterisk. So we can fix that with a calculated field. My favorite hotkey in Tableau is Alt-AC. That brings up your calculated field window. I use this hundreds of times a day. So if you remember one hotkey, Alt-AC is a good one. So we're going to call this Node Star tooltip. And what we want to do is we want to create logic for when one state is selected. So what we're going to say is if the min state equals the max state. So let's think about this for a minute. When all the states are selected, the min state is Alabama and the max state is Wyoming. So those two would not equal each other. If I just have one state selected, right? If I just have Montana selected, the min state and the max state equal each other. So basically we're saying when we have one state selected, then give me the min state. You could put min or max here, it doesn't really matter. Otherwise, when all the states are selected, say all. Or you can make it say whatever you want. You can say all states in the US, whatever you want it to say. And then click OK. And now we're going to bring that into our tooltip. And I'm just going to put it underneath so you can see the difference when we hover. So regular state with the asterisk will be on top and our new one will be on the bottom. Now, when you hover, you can see we've got all the states selected and it says all states, which is much more user friendly. And the original one says star. And then if we were to select one state, it says Minnesota in Minnesota. So that is how you can remove a star from your tooltips. And that's a wrap for me. I hope this has, there have been enough tips in this presentation and that you have something helpful to take back to your next dashboard build. And I have seen the chat lighting up, but I have not been paying attention to it. So if there are any questions, I am happy to take those now.
So there was a request to put the calc that you just used for the asterisks. If you could throw that in the chat. And there's also a question about whether you might be able to share this package workbook. Maybe it's something that you've posted or will post on Tableau Public, because no one wants to have all these spectacular puns, drop out of existence.
Yes, I will. I'm happy to put it on Tableau Public.
Excellent, thank you.
Now.
There's also a request for how do we get our Lisa Trescott Fan Club 2023 membership cards? I don't know if you can make that happen.
I will see what I can do about that. Thank you.
Excellent. So the one sort of serious question came out of here. A lot of these tricks, they're amazing tricks. They really make the reports work well and look nice and sort of just, they're really good on the visual side. But on the maintenance side, especially if you're handing this report off to someone else or, future you hasn't touched this thing in 2 years and is like, what did I do here? Do you have any tips on making that sort of transition or that just the handoff a little bit easier so you don't forget that, oh, this is there, but it's, I hit the total or whatnot?
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen again. So I am a document fanatic. I think my coworkers are on here and hopefully they will back me up on that I can't stop documenting things. So I would say always make sure you document your calculations. So when you document, you can document one line of text. So you could say, this is for removing the star in a tooltip, right? And so that doesn't affect your calculation. You can also use a backslash and an asterisk and an asterisk and a backslash, and then you can comment out multiple lines of text. So that's another way you're doing the same thing, but then you wouldn't have to backslash in front of all of your lines. Let's remove that. You can also on your worksheet show your caption, and here I might say this is an example of how to remove an asterisk on a tooltip. And then that's there for you or for any future user to see. So on this one, you might want to remind yourself in the worksheet show caption. Oops. The total is hidden to add padding. And then that doesn't show up when you put that onto a dashboard. If I were to put that on here, that caption doesn't show up anywhere. So that's really just for you or for anyone using the workbook.
Nice. You kind of had it all wrapped up like a burrito, your documentation and your there were a whole lot of really great puns in there. This will forever be my favorite HETUG presentation, unless someone else can outpun you. I honestly don't think that that's possible. And it was also really great to see that, Tableau was cooperating so nicely in a live demo.
It crashed on a live demo when I was practicing this yesterday, and I got really nervous. So I'm glad that it held up. It didn't fall apart.
All right, great. Well, thank you again so much for sharing these taco tips, Tableau tips from Tableau Conference. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of like, holy crap, this is amazing. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to pass this over to Andrew now.
All right. That was great. Thank you, Lisa. I concur with Roshni that we may never see as punny a presentation in our future again, but the challenge is out there if anybody wants to try and top it. All right, so we've made it to the formal end of our session, except for the breakout groups that are coming up. So tell us what you thought about today, whether you enjoyed the puns or not, and everything in between, of course. There's a link there to a Google survey for that. Our next session is coming up June 27th, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, if you're out west like me, and sometimes in between. We'll be featuring Heather Lewis from Augusta as the Media community member, tips and tricks with Rashid Minot, former ambassador for the TUG, and a year-in-year review. We saw some great chat happening today about presenting on parameters. We'd love it if a few people want to come together to do that. So thank you for those of you who mentioned you might be interested. There was also a request in the chat today about presenting on sets. So if anybody is interested in that, we'd love to hear from you as well. Or if you have anything else that would be interesting for people to learn, we'd love to hear from you. We can always use community speakers for this event. It's what really makes it great. So the link is at the bottom there. Last but not least, as Ginny mentioned, you have until the close of business today to submit your proposal for Appalachian State University's 6th Annual Analytics Day. It's happening June 15th from 8:30 in the morning till 5 in the evening Eastern time. So the link is there on the right. It would be great to include you in the sessions. And Ginny doesn't like to toot her own horn very much, but it is an awesome session. I've attended a number of years now, and it's just really well done, driven by the community, just like this is. So it's worth checking out, in my view, if you haven't already.
And I completely concur. It is probably the best like one-day conference that I've ever been to every single year. So
you guys are awesome. Thank you. Can I say one thing about it real quick before we move on?
Yeah.
If you haven't heard, our special feature this year is going to be the Clash of the Titans, which is going to be Tableau versus Power BI. Who can build it the best? We're building the same dashboard using iPads data in both Tableau and Power BI to see what works great and what not so great about each of them when they are competing neck and neck. So should be a lot of fun.
great. And that closes us out for the day. Thank you everyone for coming. And in just a couple seconds, I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms.